Thank you for having me. It is such an honour to be here with you all and to be, enjoying the whole day and now to be sharing with you my research and work around pornography and looking at the risks that it poses to young people today. So I want to start with a quote from Gail Dines, who is one of the leading porn researchers and experts and the founder of Culture Reframed, that is helping to build children's resilience to porn. Young people have the right to author a sexuality that is rooted in respect, intimacy, and connection. And the key word there is author, that they need the space to author an authentic sexuality, a sexuality that is in their best interests and will set them up for hopefully satisfying sexual experiences across their lives, entwining with other parts of who they are. And my basic argument today is that this fundamental right is being violated by the mainstream porn industry. So it's no surprise probably to any of you that porn is a key issue facing our children and young people. I will just, as I go, just draw out a few stats here and there. 51% of 11 to 13-year-olds have seen porn. Much of that is unintentional. They're being shown it by their friends or sent as pop-ups. Then it becomes more intentional over age. And by 16 to 17 years old, 41% have seen it within the last 2 weeks. We have a very large research literature on the impact of porn, which has followed really kind of robust methodologies, so following young people over time, following adults over time, looking at the impact and controlling for other relevant factors. And this has found that porn use increases a number of risks that we should be concerned about. It increases the risk of sexual dissatisfaction as well as relational dissatisfaction and body dissatisfaction. It increases the risk of relationships breaking up. There are some quite scary research studies looking at the impact on divorce rates. It can also drive sexual preoccupation, so that people become more preoccupied by sex, but at the same time, they're oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide here. I'm moving between two slides. That they can be thinking more about sex, but actually finding it less satisfying and taking more risks in that arena as well. Perhaps most worrying for us, although to be honest, I'm probably most worried about the top one possibly, but is also the impact on increasing sexual coercion and aggression. So for example, one study found, following adolescence over time, found that porn use predicted 2 years later it was leading to sexual harassment increasing by a factor of 6. That was specifically violent porn, but as we'll come to see, a lot of mainstream porn is violent now. Linked to these increased risks of sexual harassment, it also is increasing the risk of passive bystanding, so a kind of tolerance of sexual misconduct, and the attitudes that are conducive to sexual violence, such as sexism and objectification. We also find that exposure to porn is increasing a young person's risk of being a victim of sexual harassment or abuse, potentially via the route of self-objectification and a kind of acceptance that this is just the way that sex has to be. So my question now is why? Why does porn have these effects? And I'm going to be asking that question as I go along, always why, and following the spiral down. So we need to think about what mainstream pornography actually is. What is its nature? First of all, it's a bombarding experience. It's disorientating and confronting. As Margaret MacDonald, who did a PhD on this, says, the overall effect of the homepage layout is not the impression of any individual video or scene, but rather the endless variety and availability of them flowing inexhaustibly down the screen. And as Patrick Kilty says, this mode of design promises satisfaction whilst delivering unintelligibility and disorientation in order to remove one's sense of autonomy and intentionality through capital productive distractions. So this theme of undermining autonomy is really my key theme today. And capital productive distraction, we're going to come back to this. The porn industry is removing our autonomy in a capital productive way. It's about the profit, the bottom line. And so what this means is that it's a disorientating, jumpy experience for viewers. The average viewer is spending 10 minutes on a platform, and in that time viewing 10 pages. And what are they viewing? So again, I can talk about this for days, and I'm happy to answer any further questions on it. A lot of porn is showing violence towards women. So one study found 37%. And then another complementary study that was actually asking young people what they saw when they viewed porn. 70% very frequently saw men as dominant, compared to only 17% seeing that of women. 36% frequently saw women being called names or slurs. And other common themes across porn include teen, incest, racism, and humiliation. And so what I want to do now is to kind of bring this beyond the abstract and show you some porn titles. It is disturbing, in my opinion, and these are just so these are titles of porn videos. If you just go on any of the mainstream sites, there's absolutely no attempt to check your age or anything. And this is just the titles that I saw on a random day. So this is not particularly extreme ones. I'm not going to read them out, but... And so what we find with these titles, you know, how sex is narrated, this is really, really key. What's going on here? Well, a recent study by Fiona Vera Gray and colleagues, her conclusions are summed up as this, that depictions of practices that meet criminal standards of sexual violence, including rape, incest, and so-called revenge porn, they are labelled in ways that not only minimise or remove their criminality, but actually mock or belittle the possibility of harm. So if you're watching something that is a depiction of a rape, you're being told to view that as just light-hearted fun. Another key dimension to mainstream porn is its simultaneous rendering of itself as both fact and fiction. So this is contradictory. It says it's both fact and it's fiction, and this is central to its existence and success. So on the one side, on the factual side, that if you talk to people who are viewing porn, they are experiencing an immersion in it and an identification. They're identifying with the sex that they're viewing. So as Ferenc Muxali, who did a PhD interviewing people, found, he found a peculiar ambiguity. While all of them expressed that they were aware of the fictional nature of pornography, simultaneously they were talking about it as if it was a documentation of non-fictional and non-performed sex. And actually, a lot of porn sex, it is unclear what's staged and what's not. And a lot of sex is said to be real, you know, authentic. This is happening, amateur porn. And even if it is staged, it is fundamentally different from other staged events. And there's quite a lot of philosophy on this, that it breaks the law of reversibility. The people in porn having that sex cannot go back to not having had those experiences, which we would expect in other forms of acting. So I'm going to read a quote that is a trigger warning here, that really makes this point clear. In Adrian Nathan West's Aesthetics of Degradation, we're accustomed to dismissing the savagery of porn by saying, it's only a movie, they're just actors. But no one pretends to cover a woman's face in semen or choke her or piss in her mouth. She did not pretend to gasp or burst into sobs when she awoke. Those experiences for her cannot be undone. But when moral qualms might arise, they're quickly dismissed as, but this is only acting. Viewers are only fantasizing, and the violence is just kink. Nothing is real anymore. And again, this is shown in a study by Anna Veska and Gavi. This is an interview with a young person who really showcases this process. You'll come across clips, the person being tied up, whipped, raped by 20 or 30 people. You watch the entire thing. Then there'll be an interview at the end, and quite normally they're just laughing and talking about it, the segment that they've just shot. So it takes what is quite a degrading scene and normalises it at the end by making it quite clear that it was something that they'd gone into consensually and enjoyed. So the violence is just kink. The actors are just acting. Nothing is real. This is central to it being allowed to exist with the complete lack of regulation that is the case at the moment. So thinking about all of this, what are pornography's implicit messages? But with this whole thing, it is promoting to viewers a set of ways of thinking about sex, which are invitations to think similarly and act accordingly. These are also known as sexual scripts. So some of the core ones that porn is pushing, that in sex, the primary concern is your arousal. And if you just follow your arousal, follow the pathway within porn, that's sexual freedom, and that's all there is to your sexuality. Sex is about using somebody else's body for your own gratification, and everyday values like respect and kindness don't apply here. The things that are sexy are things like transgression and violation and dominance, and things like equality or chemistry or connection and communication, they're not. And it's also massively promoting gender norms that men should be dominant and lead, and women just want to please men. And they actually really like sex in which they're hurt, humiliated, pressured, or manipulated. Now, this is done through a number of different, it pushes these messages through all the ways I've just talked about, but sometimes quite explicitly. So here's a quote from Pornhub. Users can tune in and unzip, getting everything they need without all the real-world troubles. Because who needs an in-real-life partner when you have point-of-view Pornhub videos on your side? I mean, I find this absolutely chilling, that it is saying that people's personhood is obsolete, that if you can just, you can just extract somebody's sexuality, their body, from who they are, and who they are is not sexy and just can be removed. It's just a pain. It's the nagging wife behind the real world troubles. So, what's the problem here? And I really want to show, this is at odds. The model of sex that porn pushes is at odds with good sex. And when I say good sex, I mean that in both meanings of the word, ethical and also satisfying. That good sex, and this is, again, this isn't just me making it up, this is from research, this is, and I'm sure it will resonate with yourselves, a conversation between two people in their bodies. So it involves connection and chemistry, appreciation of each other, attunement, so attunement to your own feelings and to the feelings of the other person, and a level of equality, that we shouldn't be having two big power dynamics at play, and authenticity. People are honest about their intentions and what's going on here. Here are some quotes from people talking about this, and this is from a study of young adults who were talking about the different types of sex that they'd had, and they were talking about this type. You're able to be yourself, you want to be real with that person. It was more of two people coming together to be as close as two people can be, and I guess I kind of let go of my masculinity in a way. And this was, these forms of sex were what the young adults were saying was most satisfying and was really at odds with this other form of sex that was porn-inspired and was very instrumental and performative. I'll use your body while you use mine, and let's tick the consent box. We can act out gendered roles. You're in a role as either a viewer or a judge of the other person's body and how they're behaving, or as an object. And a lot of what you're doing is actually avoiding shame because you're trying to fit into these norms about body and about gender. You'll want her to be exactly like the girls on the internet. If she's not, you'll move on to the next one. It's ruined any sense of love, a young person talking about the impact of porn on him. Just to say as well that I think this is where we need to start with sex education. I'm not a great fan of a lot of stuff that's focusing on consent, because I think that consent starts with an assumption of porn sex, that it's fine as long as we're using each other's bodies, but then we just tick the consent box. If we start with this, consent is something much further down the line. You've got it within this, but you've got a whole lot more besides. So again, let's ask that question, why? Why is porn so horrible? Well, we need to take a step back and think about big tech and the business model across a lot of tech. So, these are people talking about the general big tech surveillance capitalism business model. We're seeing corporations using powerful AI to outsmart us and figure out how to pull our attention towards the things that they want us to look at, rather than the things that are most consistent with our goals, our values, and our lives. Now, this totally maps onto what I've just been showing you with porn. Jaron Lanier, who invented VR, it's the gradual, slight, imperceptible change in your own behavior and perception that is the product. And that is the product. It's the only possible product, changing what you do, how you think, who you are. Now, this is chilling when applied to any part of what it is to be human. But when you apply this to sexuality and relationships, the most intimate parts of who we are, the chill factor just goes up a few notches. Now, how does this work with the porn industry? Well, let's follow the money. That's been a theme today. The porn industry is hugely profitable. It makes between 35 billion and 97 billion a year. And you might think, well, how is it doing that when so much of it is free? And we're going to think about that. Now, it can't make this money from people's relational sexuality. So if there's a sexual chemistry between two people, the porn industry isn't there. It's something that's very personal, and it's not a capitalist, it's not a market for capitalism. So it's beyond the reach of the porn industry. So that form of sexuality, which is the richest form, and by the way, I should say that this isn't necessarily, I'm not talking about everyone having to be in long-term relationships. This can be between two people who've just met each other, but it is personal, and it is about chemistry and connection. It can't get there, so it ignores that form of sexuality. But human sexuality contains a multitude of potentials. People can be aroused by a range of things and desire a range of things. And that potential is what, it doesn't come out of the blue. Our sexuality entwines with other parts of the human psyche, with history and culture. And the pornography industry does not exist in a vacuum. If we think it's intersecting and interacting with centuries of misogyny. So, for example, the Victorian dichotomy of virgin and whore, that's made very good use of within mainstream free porn. Libertarianism, the sexual freedom ideology, which came about in the 60s and is very much still alive and well. And in a nutshell, basically, that is pushing this notion of freedom at the expense of a rich sexual ethics, which is what we need in the 21st century. And also, and I think the next speaker will talk more about this, surveillance capitalism fueled toxic gender norms and misogyny that people like Andrew Tate and incel culture. So it's mainstream online porn, and by the way, Bummer fueled Jaron Lanier's term for surveillance capitalism, which stands for behavior of users modified and made into an empire of rent. Oh, 5 minutes, gosh. That's gone very quickly. Right, so let me carry on. So the porn industry is taking all of this. This type of sexuality is where it can make its money, and it's looking to find individuals' vulnerabilities to different sexual scripts within that. It's then looking to develop them and bring them to fruition. And how is it doing that? Well, when I was looking into this, I didn't have to be an investigative journalist. It was hiding in plain sight. Let's visit the MindGeek website. MindGeek are the owner of, they're the biggest porn company, as far as I'm aware. They own Pornhub and a variety of other sites. And you just go on, and here they are, very loud and proud about their parasitic business model. Every action taken by a user on a web property generates dozens of data points. So that, by the way, is you going on a website and your data being gathered and used against you without your informed consent. When carefully analysed, these data points reveal important information about products and the way they're used by clients. It's critical to collect this data in order to drive better business decisions. How can we find out about you so that we can shape you towards our profit? Gathering, storing, processing, and analysing billions of data points a day is a colossal challenge that MindGeek engineering embraces. We've developed sophisticated machine learning algorithms to mine the data and extract the meaning from the noise. And this is what that means. So people and young people are being bombarded with porn. Let's think of them in the green zone, their initial bombard. Data is being gathered on them to work out what their particular sexual vulnerabilities are. And we're talking about that green zone is the wide, sticky net of free porn. And millions of people are in that net, so we only need to convert a tiny percentage of them to paying customers to make an awful lot of money. So the red is where somebody has started paying for porn. Now, maybe that's only 1 or 2%, but everybody who is using porn is being, the data is being gathered to bespokely manipulate them into developing the types of sexuality that will most likely make the porn industry money. So, for example, if they've got a vulnerability to a sexuality centered on youth and innocence, they're going to be pushed that content in the hope that they become more and more interested in it and then convert to being a paying customer. So I could talk about this for days. But in a nutshell, this is a process of children being broken in. As Gail Dines says, it's the same as the tobacco industry handing out free cigarettes to kids to get them hooked without fear of prosecution. And it's part of this wider, mainstream porn operates within a wider ecosystem where you've got things like OnlyFans and social media platforms that are encouraging children to objectify themselves and to actually see themselves as a commodity, that sex becomes about exchange and often monetary exchange. In this process, core parts of what it is to be human are being undermined. And I don't have time to talk about this in any great depth today, but I explore it in great detail in my Pornography and Human Futures report, which is available online. But what I'm just going to zoom in on very briefly here is this last one, our autonomy. Let's go back to that. Autonomy is the feeling and the reality of driving oneself and one's life. So much research has shown that it's absolutely central to flourishing, to being human, and to having meaning. Yeah, I won't be a sec. One of the biggest threats to our autonomy is manipulation. And again, there's a lot of philosophy about what is manipulation, and a lot of debate about that. But philosophers and theorists can agree that manipulation often involves the exploitation of psychological vulnerabilities, deception, being extensive in its scope, and being disinterested in people's rationality, their values, or their well-being. And so in this sense, we can see that the porn industry is both the archetypal and most thoroughly modern manipulator. People may feel this loss of autonomy by feeling themselves dependent on porn, and a huge number of people do feel like that. Or alternatively, they may not realize it, having lost sight of what Sylvie Delacroix terms the shadow self. And we can also see this pattern in other online journeys, for example, towards extremism. So just to end off, what can we do in this situation to help safeguard young people's sexuality? Well, we can do what we're doing today. We can bring porn out of the shadows. It's still too little talked about. People feel a bit awkward about it, and people are worried. There's been a very effective silencing and stigmatization of those of us that are trying to talk about it, where to be anti-porn is to be anti-sex, whereas actually, as you can see, I'm really arguing the complete opposite. We need to reduce exposure through parental controls and effective and robust age verification. Again, some people argue about that, oh, young people will find their way around it. Yes, some people will, but the simple fact is the harder you make something to do, the fewer people do it. We need to have education and everyday conversations with our children and young people. I would argue for 4 areas there, talking about our values and helping young people connect with what their core values are, very effective. What good sexual experiences involve, those core ingredients, autonomy and looking to safeguard your autonomy and being able to spot when other people are trying to undermine it, and also the nature of porn. So, for example, some core elements, talking about what are my core values, what do we mean by good sex, who and what do I want to influence my relationships and sexuality, and then how does pornography risk those things? We need to offer support for those who are struggling with this land grab, and I also would argue that we need to be using this online safety bill to make what is effectively illegal offline also illegal online. We've still got a massive loophole there, and we need to close it. Just to end off, what I'm arguing is that the story of mainstream online porn is one in which millions of people are being shaped to another's ends, and in the process they're being led away from their potential for meaningful and relational life. Everyone's an object here, with the exception of those running the industry. This situation has been protected by our silence and by hazy platitudes of sexual freedom, but we can resist this land grab through bringing porn out from the shadows, understanding it, regulating it, and building resilience to it. Thank you very much.